Paul Edwards,
Jason Todd.
the Thinker Community weekly call, the Tuesday workshop. Welcome.
Thank you. I guess you're black and I'm white today on the chessboard.
Yeah, I decided I need to put on a better shirt so I look respectable, and it turned out to be this black polo, which works really well with your contrasting white polo.
Yeah.
You know what I should have done? I should have had a white undershirt under my black polo.
Mm-hmm.
We would have been, and I need hair. No, I
No, you're the
hair.
opposite. Yeah. One has the head covering, the other doesn't. It's how we show diversity on the Thinker Growth Workshop.
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna get
didn't.
in trouble if I keep talking like that.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, we're gonna get canceled.
I know.
Well, this is good, and I'm glad that we're here. We haven't done the workshop in a little bit of time due to various travel schedules and work schedules, and but it's good to be back.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Summertime is like that for a lot of people, and we have been busy. We've certainly been working on a lot of things. A lot of it related to authors we're actively promoting and other ventures that we're experimenting with, and new authors that we're working through the cycle. And so between that and then family trips and uh, launch events, we've just had a lot of reasons to say, let's take a little hiatus and then come back once we have the bandwidth again.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be back. So, what are your what topics have been floating around uh in your world this past several weeks that we've been gone? Anything that you find?
I think I think if I were to put it into words, and these are primitive words for a guy who excels with language, I think the
You use the
thing
word
that
practice. Let's not downplay the fact that you excel with language.
no, but they're primitive by my own personal standards. I'm giving my inner
Yeah.
critic the warning that he can't leap
Yeah.
out and say you said that pertinent, right?
You're already beyond the rest of us. It's fine. You're doing great.
Well, um, but it actually might not be primitive at all to simply say that there are, you have the dog days of summer,
Hmm.
and that means different things to different people. What it means to me is just this lengthy period of, especially where I live, living inside a giant hairdryer. And funnily enough, we had a monsoon come up over the Mexican border recently into New Mexico and Arizona, and so it's actually been in 105, 110 degree temperatures and humid,
Wow.
which is fun to be out in, but not humidity like the Great Lakes humidity or the South, and so bearable, but certainly hot. At any rate, dog days of summer to me has something of a connotation of something that you just sort of slug through, right? You're like, it's not terrible, but it's hot, it's sweaty, it's sometimes you don't feel like a lot is happening. That's what I think of when I think of that saying, dog days of summer. And I think even though we have a lot of things happening and have been doing a lot of things, I think there's a period any entrepreneur should prepare for where you're just doing stuff for a while. And are you getting better? Yes, you are, but you don't always know that you are.
Mm.
It doesn't always feel like you are. You may have a period where most of what you do can feel a little bit trivial now and then. And I'm not saying it's like I've gone to saying what's the point, right? I have it deeply ensconced enough in my soul to where I know the point of what I'm doing. But I can certainly look at this past couple of months versus other periods and say, I haven't felt the rush or the momentum lately that I normally have. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, and I'm not ascribing it to spiritual warfare or anything like that. All I'm saying is, I've been in a thing where I'm just waking up and doing what I do every day faithfully, and trusting, I guess, is the thing. I just have to trust that at some point, as things always do, things are going to change. Something's going to go differently. Some things are going to go my way. Others aren't. And then there's going to be things that come along that I wasn't looking for, but that are serendipitous and end up going my way, even though I didn't know it was my way.
Yeah.
That would be my encouragement. I think a lot of entrepreneurs could get into a phase like this at some point in their business, and they could think, I've reached the end of it. This has grown stale. There's nothing more to be garnered out of it. But as I was just working on some content here for one of our clients, and as I reminded myself yesterday in some of our conversations, just when you think you've reached all there is about something, there's further you can go, deeper you can dig, more you can mine out of things. And so you shouldn't take a season like this as an excuse to begin to say, okay, well, I've reached the end of it. Nothing more to see here. Move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Reminds me of something that a writing coach or an author talked about. Is he made a little video series for people writing books, and he's written, I don't know, I think he sold like 70 million copies or something like that of his books. He talked about how most authors give up in the valley or something like that. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, right? But it's that long stretch where you just got to get up and just slog through the work. It's not exciting. It's not necessarily enlightening. You're just doing your thing. And his encouragement, I think, was the same as yours, that you just got to get up and you got to do it, rather than, I think the tendency is, number one, like you're talking about, you almost look for the excitement. And so then you get off the long stretch of road that you're on to just detour, just because you feel like you need a little bit of interest. And I think sometimes that detours people permanently off of the path that they should just stay on and build skill sets, build relationships, rather than, starting something new. I wonder to what degree that idea of the slow days is a gift in some ways, kind of like the the Mexican siesta type of thing. I remember we did some missions work down in, I think it was Honduras, and there's a gaggle of us ready to deal with concrete, and the concrete truck's supposed to be there like 8, and the concrete truck gets there at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, who knows, and then worked for an hour or two, and it's like, okay, it's time for break. And how different certain cultures are from the United States. We just press, where maybe we see then this contrast with those dog days, whereas some cultures perhaps are a little more relaxed in their day to day. The Swedish celebrate a daily, what do they call it? Fika, something like that, which is a coffee time. And they will leave their buildings and they'll go out to, the square, the public square. They'll go to coffee shops and they just sit there and talk. And the rule is you can't talk about work. So you just talk about anything you want. And then after that hour, half hour, whatever it is, then you go back to your job and you just continue working through it. I wonder if the Western culture, sometimes we press a little bit too hard, and instead of taking the long path, a longer outlook and resting incrementally, we just sprint and then burn ourselves out, or maybe sacrifice some of the gains we could have because we just don't stick with it long enough.
I think you're right. I think Well, in the case of the Swedes, there's probably 5 to 6 months out of the year where they really need that because it's dark all day, every day. Um, but the obviously in Mexico and Central America, they have regular daylight hours just like the rest of us, and yet that's a staple of their culture. And what I have learned to do in these dog days of summer type of thing, stretches, and they're not just in the summer, they can happen any time of year. What I have learned to do is, number one, I moved to Arizona because I was sick to death of Pacific Northwest weather. It's one of the reasons we moved here. And because I'm self-employed and I'm not tied to a desk or out working a job, there's really nothing stopping me from going and taking a dip in my swimming pool. So that's one example of something you can do, right? Another thing I'll do is I'll just go out there and sit down when my kids are at school and my bride is busy at her job. It's a chance to actually check out on my phone for a bit and noodle around and not be interrupted by anybody.
Yeah.
Because if I do it when they're around, as soon as it's like clockwork. As soon as I turn on a podcast or a video, my family could be dead quiet, but as soon as I turn on some kind of content that I'm interested in, blah, 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 they have 50 million questions, and all that sort of thing. But then there's this other thing, right? It's like, if you're running a business, there's all sorts of stuff that needs to be done. And the smaller and newer and more startup you are, the fewer extra hands there are to do them, and the more they get pushed to the side. And both I've heard you say this, and I certainly have had it myself, where we have like maybe just one sales call or one podcast scheduled for the week, and so we say to ourselves and sometimes to each other, this is a great opportunity to catch up on a bunch of editing, on a bunch of marketing materials, on just making sure the books are up to date, et cetera, et cetera. And so you don't have to. It may not be the sexiest part of what you do, but it's very necessary. If you don't attend to it, it'll fester and it'll eventually pull the rug out from underneath you. And it's an opportunity just to get focused on those things, right? Get up, review your goals, right? Reread, take some time to do some reading that you haven't been doing. Take some time to learn, to get just a little bit better at the stuff that you're not necessarily the best at, but you got to do it, and make sure everything's up to date. Make sure, as I had to do yesterday, not particularly my most favorite thing to do, but I had to get our social media back online because I'd let it lapse for a couple of weeks. So we have, we do some posting every day on LinkedIn and X, and I said, yeah, it's time. We got to keep that running because we are getting people scheduling sales calls now, and they're saying, I heard about you on social media. And we're like, gee, where? Nobody interacts or says much about our content at all. So yeah, it's just, you can fill that time with meaningful work. Perhaps not the exciting work, perhaps not the most exhilarating work, but meaningful nonetheless. And you can also use it to just take a little bit of time to sit there and catch your breath and recenter yourself so that you don't get, separated from your mission, from your vision, from your purpose in pursuing this.
It reminds me of a conversation I had the other day about effort and results with a very intelligent young lady who's going to go far in life, I'm sure, but her challenge, because she's good at many different things, is going to be figuring out what to say no to, because there will be things that she puts a 2 effort in and gets 8 results. And there will be things she puts 8 effort in and gets 2 results, on the scale of 1 to 10. Mm-hmm. And often there's a tendency, particularly with overachievers or entrepreneurs who feel like they need to scurry and do everything, to do one of a handful of things, either to do all of the things, continuing doing the thing that you're putting 8 effort in and getting 2 results, or the tendency might be to stop doing those things entirely.
Yeah.
And focus more on the two and get 8 results. But there's a transition period. And I feel like, this idea of social media. Now, I feel like I put in 8 effort on social media, and I hate it.
Yeah.
I don't like doing social media. You won't find me. I've got a good friend of mine. He's been a good friend of mine for years and years and years. But boy, that guy will go on an anniversary trip, and it's like he's live streaming the whole thing. And it makes me want to throw up in my mouth, because I think, like, why would you do that? And yet he loves it. His wife loves it. People love it.
I know. Yeah.
Mother-in-law even posts like, oh, this looks great. And that's the last thing I would ever want to have happen, is that I like clued everybody in on where I was at, and they're all like, that looks like a great dinner. It's like, I didn't want you here for a reason. I'm certainly not going to invite you on social media. And the same thing happens, I think, with all of the myriad things we need to do in business. Like, I get jazzed about working on strategy, and I will name a book, and I will put that cover together, and I will work with them on messaging and all that type of stuff. But when it comes to be like, oh, we gotta tell people about this book, the first thing in my mind is like,
yeah,
okay, what are we gonna say?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I can feel it. Like, it's like my motor runs out of gas, and I feel stuck in the middle of the lake. Like, I'm going to have to paddle ashore. And all of a sudden I'm putting this 8 effort in, getting 2 results.
Yep.
And it becomes very discouraging. And so subconsciously, sometimes my mind just puts that off. And if I look at the amount of time that I might spend on something, so what happens in my mind, it does this. And I think this is true of other people too, but here's how my mind works. When I'm really engaged in something with strategy, or something I'm really skilled at, and I'm getting, one of those things I get put into effort, get 8 results, I'll think about it constantly. I'll be just driving down the road. I'll be thinking about that. I'm like, oh, okay. And all of a sudden my brain's putting together things. So when I sit down at my computer, it's a half hour, whatever it is, and boom, like, I know where I'm headed, but I've been thinking about this all the time, random times. And so the actual concentrated effort is a very small amount of time. When I go to things like social media, there's no like thinking about it. I'm not out walking the dog going like,
what will I post on Facebook?
Or can't wait to get that post up. Can't wait to respond to those comments. Oh, I hope somebody knows what's going on. Nothing, right?
Yeah.
The 0 effort. But when I sit down and do the work, it's not a half hour. It's not an hour. It could be, it's like, oh, this is going to take a long time.
Yeah.
And just the time blocking aspect of it feels discouraging.
Yeah.
Coupled with the idea that I know I'm putting in a lot of effort to get very minimal results, whereas somebody else who knows it, loves it, likes it, is thinking about it all the time. They're putting in 2 effort, getting 8 results. In that transition period where it's like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense to hire anybody for this. And the automated tools, as wonderful as they are, oversell themselves. And so it's like, okay, well, just going to have to do it, but it tends to get pushed off in favor of the things that we're good at. Now, at some point in time, the idea would be stop doing things you don't like and you're no good at, and find somebody else who's good at those and likes them. But there is that transition period where it's not reasonable. It's not going to work. So you either figure out how to set up a really solid and creative agreement with someone, or you just got to slug through it. And to your point, those long stretches of time where we're not doing the fun, exciting thing, you just like, okay, well, this is going to take a while. It's going to take longer. I'm not necessarily going to enjoy this. So, going to work on it for a little bit and then walk your body out to the pool and then, recharge a little bit. All right, well, here we go. And that might be, bringing this back to an end point here, that might be something that people can experiment with. It's something I've done pretty routinely throughout my life. Is I know when I feel like this my brain's getting a little bit stuck, I immediately change my circumstances. So, years ago, I bought noise canceling headphones, and I made it part of my routine that if I get stuck, I go to a Starbucks or another coffee shop, put on my noise canceling headphones, and the circumstances bring my brain out of the mold that it's been in, and also it's like, oh, new thoughts, new energy, and or I'll go for a walk is
yeah, absolutely. That's something I forgot to mention because I don't do it as much at this time of year because it's 110 outside. But once we're into October, I will write a manuscript or edit one for an hour, and then I'll get up and I'll take a 10-minute walk just around a short block in our neighborhood. And do I always like get breakthrough as a result of doing that? No, but it's an interruption. It's a healthy interruption. It's a healthy intermission, shall we say? It's not interruption necessarily, but intermission. Just like you would expect if you went to see a performance, right? A play of some kind, you would expect an intermission in Act 2 and Act 3. And that goes back to what we've always taught people about, the Genesis method. And we've said, look, if you're going to do creative work, even if it's not work that you think is what society labels creative, right? If you're fixing a car and you get stuck on solving a problem and you get up and go for a walk and think it through and remember everything you know, chances are you'll come up with a solution. So we're not talking here about painting pictures or, writing poems and sonnets necessarily. All work is creative.
Yeah.
What we are talking about is we function best as creators when we have intermissions. And so circling back to the whole dog days of summer type motif that we put on this, that's what I have to remember in the moments where my shadow self begins to pop up his head and say, you see, this isn't really all that worth it. You see, you're just sucking up oxygen. This isn't going anywhere. Let's just go get a job. And I know that voice so well now that I'm like, yeah, I know who you are, and zip it. But what are you going to replace it with, right? Because that dialogue is going to continue.
Yeah.
If you can't, at least it does for me. If I can't say to it, no, it's a lull, and I can either take advantage of the lull and do meaningful things, some of which are recreational and some of which are business related, or I can let the lull happen to me and find myself beginning to agree with that voice.
Yeah.
At some point, and we don't want to do that because back to what we always tell people on the workshop, if you have a product or a message that you believe is going to change the world, you have a responsibility to work at it, get good at communicating it, refining it, delivering it, offering it, selling it, marketing it, spreading it. That responsibility doesn't change just because you have a lull in the action.
Yeah, that's a good point. You brought up the idea of shadow self, which it's I think probably 4 years since I've heard anything really about the shadow self. And so maybe let's unpack that for a moment, because I like how that dovetails with this idea of dog days, which are a real thing. It's a real feeling that comes up, and there are real voices that, our own voice, hopefully, if you're hearing other voices, like, please see somebody, this is not the podcast for you. But if it's just your own voice, take heart. We all feel it. We all have our own voices. And it's an opportunity to maybe, like you talk about, recognize when that this spirit starts knocking on the door, you know how you're going to respond. And that's the shadow self. So the shadow self is the things we hide, repress, and deny. This, I'm just going to give you my understanding of it. You chime in too, since you're the one who brought it up. So the things we hide, repress, and deny. So if we look at a light source that we're staring at, there are things about ourselves that everybody can see and we want them to see. It's that facade, right? I want you to think I'm smarter than I am. So I put on a nice polo today instead of a dumpy t-shirt. And I smile because I can sound unfriendly. And so I've learned to smile more because it makes me sound friendlier. Not that I am unfriendly, but I can get in my head and start thinking about things, and all of a sudden I become very pointed. Burp, 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 burp.
Yeah.
And we're like, whoa, back off, dude. I'm like, I was just thinking about stuff, right? And so we put on that facade. We want everybody to see it, and then there are things we put in our shadow. We don't want people to see, and very importantly, sometimes we don't want to see them as well. And it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. And I'll end my little intro with this. It could be it could be an entirely good thing. And here's a silly example, but kids do crazy things. Seventh grade spelling bee. I was going to win that spelling bee, and I was up against my good friend Jason Park, or Kevin Park rather. I'm Jason. So who was that? I'm Jason Todd. That was Kevin Park. I was up against my good friend Kevin, and I was going to crush him. Not because I was a much better speller. It just happened. That's how the cookie crumbled. He and I were good spellers, but the cookie crumbled, and I had a good word I could spell. And I remember thinking a handful of things. One of which was Kevin probably wants to go to this, go to the regional spelling bee more than Jason does. So I had it in my mind that I was gonna misspell my word on purpose so that he could spell his word, and he was gonna go to the spelling bee because Jason doesn't care that much. When in fact, actually, truth of that exchange, or the greater truth in it, is that I was afraid of what came next. I was afraid to go to regionals because I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I 100% knew I was going to not be able to spell as good as all of those nerds. And so out of fear, I decided to leave. The other truth, though, is that I knew I was a good speller. And if I put that much effort, if I worked at it, because I didn't work at this stuff, like if I had worked at it, I really felt like I might become the person who everybody else kind of thinks is weird, and I might be made fun of, and they might think differently of me, and I wouldn't have my same friend group. So I dialed back my effort to keep my social structures together in some ways. Which is like saying, hey, I'm really good at this thing, and I could excel at this, but I don't want to be seen that way. So I tuck it back here so you don't think that I'm that great at it either.
Yeah.
Something that you're even skilled at, throw it in your shadow because you don't want to be separate from somebody else. So that the shadow self, and there are reasons that the shadow self can be a good thing. It can be a good thing because you don't want, like, not everybody deserves your crazy. Show up with a facade. Absolutely. Dinner parties, absolutely show up with your facade rather than, your cantankerous self that you leave at home. But don't throw too much into your shadow and hide, repress, and deny the things that you want to do, the things that you're great at. And also, sometimes the things we hide and repress and deny are the things we need to deal with. And in not dealing with them, then we are we are unable to hold good relationships with ourselves or others.
I think what happens is analogous to, analogous is not the right word, parallel to denying certain descriptive laws of human existence. For example, you and I can say, gravity no longer exists. We can say that 100 times a day for the rest of our lives and believe it in the depths of our being. It's not going to make it go away, right? The shadow is like that. meaning you can deny it, you can repress it, you can hide it, you can never speak about it, you can never share it, you can never open it up. You can do all of that all you want to. You can say, I don't believe in it. It doesn't mean it's not there. And it shows up and contradicts you, often when you least expect it. One of the things that I recently learned about my shadow. Now, I'm gonna bring in our old friend, the Enneagram here, for a little bit, because this is not going to look the same for other people. So when you hear this, don't think that this is, well, do I have that? You don't. This is unique to but I'm not the only person who has this. This is a personality type. And this lady, I was listening to this interview, and she said this just profoundly interesting thing that suddenly clarified for me so many situations that have either gone nowhere or have gone south for me. And so she said, we would like people, meaning this personality type, so my personality type, the dark side of my personality, would like people to fit us as opposed to our accommodating them. We're imposing. We can be selfish. We can be completely blind to what would help or benefit or please or anything like that other people. And so there's actually like almost a possessor type of shadow dimension to me. Like instinctively, without thinking about it much, it naturally occurs to me, I want to take this person and mold them in my image. So I have to be careful. You and I were having this conversation yesterday about a project we're working on. I have to be careful that I don't give that guy the voice that he really wants. Like, I mean, he wants to see everybody doing what I'm doing. Because damn it, I'm, this, if only you knew what I knew, right? I have to be careful against it. And you see how uncomfortable it would sound on an ordinary basis to admit this. Like, who wants to admit to being that kind of person? Well, I'm totally comfortable with it. So I realize I'm in control of it. I don't have to behave that way. I just have to make a conscious choice to pay attention to what's coming out of my mouth and what's brewing up in my soul. So, when you're thinking about the shadow selves, right? However this manifests for you, and it's going to manifest differently for an Enneagram 7 than it is for a 4 like me. But it's good to be aware. It's good to dig deeper. It's good to spend time studying. What am I prone to? Now, you and I have walked together for quite a while now, and I remember when you talk about the story of the spelling bee. Now, it takes me right back to when we started working on your first book, because you were like, I've done all these amazing things, and I've got this incredible story, and I've been through all this hardship and difficulty, but I'm actually like, there was a part of you that was just deathly afraid of putting it out there.
Oh yeah.
As though it could not possibly be valuable, and it could only be a liability to you.
Yep.
And, I don't remember the extent to which I had anything to do with it, other than being a presence who sat there and listened to that. But if you were to tell me that now, from everything that we've been through and talked authors through and talked people off the ledge and all that, I would flip the BS card right away. Not because it's not intimidating, not because it's not frightening to you and your unique personality type, but just because I know that I know how bringing that to light and letting people see it and letting people rub up against it and experience it, and how much that can serve as a catalyst for growth with other people. And so the shadow self, right? I think one of the things that he gets a lot of negative connotation, and he does, it's our animalistic side. So it's very impulsive. It's very instinct driven. It's very directed towards self-gratification, self-preservation, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I get that. But I'm not trying to cast it as a diabolical. I'm trying to cast it as something that actually is there for a reason. It can be converted into an asset, but you have to study it very carefully. You have to understand its motives and its origins, and you have to learn how to outperform it so that it becomes a driving force that you can use for good. And most people never, I shouldn't say most people, but I think there's probably fewer people who take enough time to understand that. Quite a small minority of people who invest the time and the energy to discover who that person is, that lower self, versus lots of people who just run with it on autopilot.
Yeah, I think so. You began this as talking about the voice that kind of comes up in your head with a certain message, and that message tends to be a repetitive message, same message every time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the groups that show up, knocking on your door, and you're like, oh, here they are again, and they always the same message.
Yeah.
Right. And
not to interrupt, that reminds me, I find that funny when people have the sign up on outside their door that says, "We found Jesus." We don't just it answers the question.
Concerned about the future.
Yeah. We don't want to. We've
Want a Bible study.
We've already tried Amway.
Yeah, that's it.
Anyway, please continue.
I am selling satellite service though, so if you want to stop. So the thought comes to my mind about that shadow. I remember pretty distinctly the moment that you're talking about when I was walking around, actually on one of my walks. I was walking around my neighborhood, telling you, this is before we started working together. I was still kind of considering whether to work with you. I said, hey, here's the deal. I had determined, well, first I will unwind in just a moment. I had determined that in my life, I wasn't going to do what my personality tendency is. And I'm an Enneagram 5, W6. That's my tendency. My tendency is to be very, 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 very secluded. Maybe the right word.
Yeah.
I will pull off and go to the quiet times. I enjoy that, right? Mm-hmm. And also due to my particular experiences in life and skill sets, I will come out into the spotlight and do my thing, and then I will retreat, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm an ambivert in, if there ever was one.
Yep.
But introverted 5W6, which means I'm very thoughtful. Now, when I was thinking about putting out my book, I knew, I was like, man, it's time. Like I've got to get this message out there. I have to do this.
No.
And the next voice was, you're going to be criticized. Nobody cares anyhow. Go home. Stop talking.
Yeah.
It's like, just go away. Get out of the spotlight. Go away. Because if you take the things that are really valuable, really meaningful, that's not just a song and a dance and making people feel good. No, this is like, these are the things. It's like if I took all the things I was ruminating about for my years of seclusion, and I haven't spent years in seclusion, but if you saw my inner world, my library, all the things I was thinking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's all crazy too. I'm convinced of that. So, and yet, I think there's tremendous value in it too. It's like, if I'm going to bring this outside and I'm going to be like, hey, Paul, this is what I'm thinking. Right. And then beyond that, I'm going to be like, hey, I published a book that's never going to go away. Everybody's going to be able to find it forever. Here's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I was afraid of that moment. What happens then when it's really on the line? It's not just Jason singing or Jason, emceeing or whatever, or Jason giving a public speech. No, this is my inner world I'm releasing to. And I was very afraid. And that inner voice, my voice, which hit me at the spelling bee, hey, don't put yourself out there. You're going to fail. It's a bomb. People are going to chuckle, and everybody's going to be like, hey, some people are going to be like, wow, that's really amazing. Some people are going to be like, that's terrible. Right? What do I do then? Oh, I don't know. So instead, go back, sit at your seat, stay here. Right?
Yeah.
Same voice. Boop, boop, boop. And if I evaluated my life, that voice, just like you've recognized whatever the voice is that for you, I have a voice. It says different things to me, but the end result of which is the same. Slow down, sit down, shut up.
Yeah.
And that, you can hear how that is so antithetical to, if you have a product, service, or message you think is going to change the world, you got to get good at delivering it. You don't just go home and sit down and stick to yourself and go, well, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Because nobody's showing up at my door saying that.
Right.
It's only in my head. And there's where I think some of the shadow shows up. And now you have the opportunity, just like, very, very funny. You put out the point. It's like, I found Jesus. I've sold Amway.
Yeah.
Please, it's fine. Go away. We have to come up with that same programmed response over time, that when the voice comes in to be like, all right, hold on. I recognize you. You keep coming around.
Yep.
And I didn't ask for you to be here, but you showed up. So here's my speech. And you have to give that voice a little speech. And when we do that, and then beyond the speech, take action in the opposite direction. The voice, shut up, start talking. The voice says, sit down, stand up. The voice says, go home, go out. Do the exact opposite of it, because that voice is trying to keep you safe, but it doesn't know.
Yeah. You have to treat it as a spiritual being with an intellect and a will, albeit not a very good intellect, but an intellect nonetheless, which means you can talk to it, which means you can interact with it. I think one of the things that I've learned to say to that voice is, I hear you, but I'm not going to listen to you. I hear you. I know we've been here before, but I'm not afraid this time. So I'm not just going to keel over because you say, well, it's all over now. We got, it's like doomsday thing. Another example of this, right, is I think a lot of people can relate to what you shared, but when you're an Enneagram 4, right, a big thing is like, everything's got to be significant. So now you talk about like having this tremendous inner world that you're afraid to share. I've got this tremendous inner world, and I think everybody ought to know about it. Right. And so when I'm misunderstood and when people, poo-poo it or all that, I can just get like lightning rod, full of venom and, offended and how dare you. And like, it's just, like if I actually acted out what my instinctive emotions are at the moment when somebody, rejects or ignores or bypasses me. Yeah. So it's like, it's not just a hiding thing, right? There's people out there who like, the temptation for me is not to think, well, I have a message or product that could change the world, but who cares? The problem for me is I have a bunch of random thoughts that probably wouldn't change the world, but I think they would. And so I think everybody else should hear them and everybody else should adopt them and everybody else should be doing exactly what I'm doing. That's not true either. So you have to you have to let that voice speak too. You don't have to follow him. You don't have to obey him. You don't have to transmit to the world what he's telling you, but you have to let him speak. And say, well, okay, there's probably some merit to that, but there's probably some avenue or some contrast or some penumbra of that I haven't really investigated.
Yeah.
I don't really know what the counterbalance is to my argument. I don't know what I don't know because I haven't bothered to look. And that's part of why, what I've learned from you and from my bride as well is what I don't check or look into or investigate or research is frequently where the gold is for me. Because then I can have strong convictions loosely held. But if I just have the strong convictions, right, and then I channel all that, that yearning for significance and being great and being singular and being special into it, it'll backfire on me. I won't have the balance. I'll display an unrealistic degree of zeal and not a balanced, thoughtful, I see this is the side I favor. This is what I say. And then there's this, and this is not without merit and not without truth as well.
It sounds like more tendency to be on the reaction rather than the response end of things.
Yeah. And see, like all of that is worth discussing and worth understanding. Now I'm going to turn into my zeal. Like you need to know what I know, right? You need to know this about yourself, but not what I just told you. You need to understand how that shows up uniquely in your personality. If I could pass that on to a listener, viewer of the workshop today, if I could say, this is worth studying and paying attention to. Not just because I've studied it and paid attention to it, though. I was as ignorant as the next person was of this. But knowing it has been such a wonderful relief to me in so many ways, because now, not only do I sense it about myself, I also look at others' behavior and I say, okay, I could just write that person off as a dick.
Yeah.
Or as it rhymes with witch, right? Or something like that. But hold on, they have a context too.
Yeah.
They have a background too. They have a personality type. There's a story to why that person behaves the way they do. And unless they're brandishing a weapon at me, or committing some sort of illegal act or something like that, I think I have some degree of responsibility. I don't know how big, but some degree to attempt to piece that together and reconstruct it and say, why are they that way? So,
yeah. One of the things you bring up is this idea, and you put it in one of the new books you're coming out with. The quote, "I'm already wrong in some way, to some degree I'm not yet aware of."
yeah, I don't know where I got that from, but
when I read that, I was like, oh, because it's true, right? I'm already wrong in some way, to some degree I'm not yet aware of, which I think if I think back, if I evaluate a bit of my life, right? I'm mid-40s now. There was a time when I would know that. I know I'm already wrong in some way, to some degree I'm not yet aware of, but it's not now. Right.
In this case, I'm aware that I'm not wrong.
And couple that with some sort of feeling of immediacy, like this has got to be changed right now.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody's good, right? And I don't know. I was a much younger man. And I in business, where that would come out is I would overcare people. They would be like, hey, I want to start a business. Or I need help in my business. And I would just like run out ahead. When in fact they were not doing that stuff because they were unable or didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, boom, now it's my project because I care more about it than they do.
Yeah.
Which I learned over time, and that was because that I think part of it why I want to do this, because I really do care about these individuals. I really want to see great things for them, right? And I could see it, and they could even buy it in their minds, right? They just wouldn't walk the path.
Yeah.
So I had to tone down this idea that Jason cares, because that's also one of the risks, right? Part of my personality is I could come across as seeming like I don't care. When in fact I do care.
Yeah.
But I don't feel it in the same way.
Mhm.
So these ideas of feelings, I used to respond to the feeling of immediacy and the feeling of this needs to be done and the feeling you should do this because can't you see how great this is going to be? And now I've am moving in that, evaluating at times that I will, number one, not out care somebody about a project of theirs.
Yeah.
I will support you, but if you're not going to take the first step, I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And if you stop walking on this path, I will 100% stop walking. And I don't care. Like, there's nothing immediately needs to be resolved anyhow. So I don't respond to those same feelings in the same way. And I've let myself off the hook that if you don't like me, okay, I sometimes don't like myself. So that's not news. You know, and I've sort of just resolved that, okay, some of these feelings of having to go away or some of these feelings I gotta press further, what's more true than my feelings? Because I also know that, like, the dog days of summer, okay, does the business want the dog days of summer? No. Business is just doing its thing. We feel dog days of summer. All right. What do we do with that? Right. We have a choice. Right. Now we respond in a certain way that we stay true to the business and stay true to what has to happen, even though we have a certain feeling. And I think the same is true in interpersonal relationships or in business relationships. Certainly when we're working with creative people who've written manuscripts, some people think their manuscripts are great right out of the gate. And I, having made it through a couple books, but one that I wrote entirely on my own, I know that I could even think this is great today and reread it 3 weeks from now and go, what? That makes no sense. So I now sort of I'm able to take a step outside of myself and go, okay, well, you're not feeling great. What are you gonna do about it? Or you came across weird. Okay. You came across great. Okay. But what needs to get done? And just go do the things that need to get done. And then be willing to put yourself out there, right? So if there's a particular fear, back to your point, that moment I announced to you, hey, this voice is coming up in my head. And I know that right beyond that I've learned in my life that when it says, go home, sit down, shut up, that's when you need to move in that direction. So, and I told you, part of the reason why I know this is the time is because that voice is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. That is drowning out all of the other noise whenever I think of telling you, yes, let's go. And now I'm telling you so you can hold me accountable and you know me a little bit better, because if you're going to coach me in a book, Uncovering My Soul, you have to know me.
Yep.
Which, to an Enneagram 5, I don't care to be known. I don't, like, it's a double-edged sword. It's like, I really desperately want to be known.
Yeah.
But also go, yeah, that is all risk. So it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Right. And I pushed against that to basically say, hey, Paul, I got a bat and a ball. You want to go out and play? You want to go out and play with me? And, and I'm hoping that when you say yes, you're sincere, that you actually do. Because I also know as a 5, I go, yeah, that's probably not true. They probably don't care. They just want to do business or they just want to do whatever, so it's like, don't take the risk. So all of those evaluations go on in my mind, which I've am learning to, instead of getting stuck in the evaluation stage, set up some principles. I'm already wrong in some way to some degree. I'm not yet aware of. Okay, great. Off the hook. I don't have to be right. Whenever I have that voice that comes up in my head, I have to move in that direction.
Yeah.
Because that's keeping it's a fear that's guarding the gateway to my growth.
Yeah.
All right. So now I got
into it. Yeah.
I got two good things. Whenever I say, well, you should not be vulnerable, you should not be open. It's like, well, evaluate whether you're just trying to stay safe or whether it could be productive. And if it could be productive, what do you got to lose? What, they're not gonna like you? Whatever. Again, sometimes I don't like myself. Why are you required to like me all the time?
Yeah.
And so we come up with these principles, which can only be handled through evaluated experience, I think. And you have your own principles too, I'm sure.
Well, not only that, but here's the thing, particularly about the vulnerability side, but also expressing yourself and inviting perspective on what's going on inside your own head. Both you and I are types to spend a lot of time in our own heads, which is probably why we can have these lengthy discussions. And at least to the two of us, they're interesting. I don't know I'm not going to speak for anybody.
No, I figured that everybody's listening to this and they're like, this is so boring.
All right.
And the whole time, I'm just like, everybody thinks it's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to be, it's no, I'm going to go in a completely different direction with that. I better not. But we enjoy that, and yet there's a danger to it, which is that you lose sight of the fact that there are other perspectives, there are other mentalities, there are other angles, there are other lenses through which to view things. So whether it's putting something out there or whether it's simply testing out your ideas, we have a lot of social, shall we say, I don't want to say hard and fast rules, but general social obligations, I guess, maybe, where we keep a lot of things that we really would want to talk about on the down low. And as you said earlier, right, at a dinner party, yes, keep that on the down low. In a business networking situation, yeah, keep that on the down low. When you're meeting people for the first time, yeah. But you got to have an outlet somewhere where you can talk about that stuff and you can say, this is what I believe, this is what I think, this is what I want to do, this is what, and you need somewhere you can go where the people around you sincerely care about you, but they also are experienced and intelligent enough to say, you know what, that's not a very good idea. And I'll tell you why I think it's not going to work. Or this isn't correct. And you need to go back to the drawing board. Or this represents a departure from everything we know about you. This is in conflict with your values. This has nothing to do with your brand. This is, I don't know what's got into you, but this is not you. We can see it coming from a country mile. You're going to crash and burn with this. So it's one of the reasons I believe in things like mastermind and people who I'm accountable with and open and transparent with, because I've spent way too many years in isolation coming up with these things that I thought, this is a great idea, man, it's going to change the world. And I go out there and I don't even get an audience to share what it is.
Yeah.
Never mind explain the idea. So you have to build these things, products, services, ideas, messages. You have to build them in community.
Well, and another thing as we're coming to close here, while we're recording this, I was briefly interrupted by a kid asking, hey, can I go to throwing practice or track and field? Right. Now, why is that interesting to me? Because we come to the Tuesday workshop as practice. That's partially why I come. It's practice having conversations about meaningful topics in a open space, which further refines what I'm thinking about, which makes me act or contributes to me acting better because I'm thinking about things. Furthermore, I'm communicating it. So it makes me a better communicator about these things rather than just sitting in my head. It also provides me a bit of accountability to move those balls forward. Like if you're going to write a book, you got to start writing it, right? If you're going to be a good communicator, you have to communicate more. And so it is more experience in the things that matter to our personal lives or professional lives on a weekly basis. Just like if you don't go to throwing practice in the fall, you're not going to be as good as everybody else who went to throwing practice.
Mm-hmm.
You're not exercising that muscle. So I think when people look at masterminds or something like that as, well, I don't have a need. Well, that might be true. You don't have a need now, but you're preparing for the need that you are absolutely going to have in the future.
Yeah.
So it's a great opportunity to stretch those muscles among people who know we're just practicing here.
Yeah, you don't build a bridge across a river the day you drive up to it. You build it so that when you drive up to it, you go right across.
Yep.
You don't build a friendship when you're suddenly in an emergency. You suddenly in an emergency and you realize I have a lifeline because I've built a friendship or a relationship. And so that's why I would say the time when the need is the greatest is when you think you don't need it.
Absolutely.
It's the exact opposite. Everybody needs a friend when their life's in turmoil and crisis. Right? That's a given. What's not so easily understood is, why do I need a friend when, everything's firing along on all cylinders? Well, first of all, it's not, because there's always more growth you can do. But secondly, that's what you see right in front of you. You don't see the future. And we all can remember what life was like in the summer of 2019, right? Economy had never been better. Job unemployment was at the lowest it had ever been. Record growth. Technology just changing on a daily basis and making life so incredibly easy. We didn't know what we were starting to lose track of what it was like for things to be difficult or complicated. And 12 months later, economic collapse, businesses shuttered by force, people losing jobs, people going out of business, people having to pivot into completely different lines of business because their business was based totally on face-to-face interaction, and now you couldn't have it anymore. And nobody saw that coming. So just as nobody saw that coming in the middle of 2019, here we are in the middle of 2024, and you don't know what's coming in the middle of 2025. That's why you need to do this now. I don't care how well you're doing on your balance sheet. So there we are. That's my soapbox.
Well, if it's the zombie apocalypse, I'm going to die because I'm overweight, not out of shape, and there are plenty of people I pass by each day who will definitely outrun me. But it's a good point, and it's why we do these things, because when we don't, we're either growing or we are atrophying.
Mm-hmm.
That's a principle in our bodies, and it doesn't take long. You've got to continue to use those muscles, or you will lose them.
Yeah.
And that's why we do the workshop. So we're at the end of our time today, and as promised, we show up to talk about things that we believe matter. And we hope that our viewers and listeners believe that they matter too. And if we're providing value for you, go ahead and click the like button, subscribe. If you have some topic that you think that we should be talking about, you're welcome to join us. Join the community and join this workshop, and ask your questions in social media. We'll be happy to answer them. Paul, pleasure as always.
Great to be here.
All righty. We'll see you next time on the Tuesday workshop, 10 a.m. at thinkergrowth.com.